thank you all for coming to lunch, and I'd like to start with a round of applause for Jean-Yves Le Gall and the International Astronautical Federation, who hosts this conference. Thank you. We're off to a great start after day one. I want to tell you how this is going to work. I'll make a few remarks here, and then everyone can get up. We'll get lunch, and then our keynote speaker will address us after we've had a chance to get a little food. But I want to start with an assertion here, something maybe you can spend the rest of the conference thinking about. I argue that this is maybe the best time there's ever been to be in the space arena, or especially the space business. I bring that up to you from the perspective, I work at a company that under NASA's leadership and Air Force leadership, and sometimes on our own, we've been part of a lot of programs over the years, Apollo, Delta, Space Station, Space Shuttle, and all of those have been great learning experiences, and the forefathers and mothers who raised me and some of the Boeing people here taught us a lot. But never before have we seen more different ways that people are addressing space. And so I think it's just a fantastic time for Australia to be announcing formation of a new space agency. If you look back, I talk about Apollo when Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, the pictures that we all saw worldwide, the images of people glued to their TV screens, those images were coming through the Honeysuckle Creek ground station here in Australia. And other speakers have talked about Cassini and the other fantastic ground system networks here. And as a commercial satellite manufacturer, I would argue it's awfully important to our business. So kudos to Australia on taking that step to form a space agency and get a little more deliberate about priorities. We're very excited to work with you going forward. And with that, I will stop and invite everybody to get a bite of lunch, and rather than talk at you any longer, let you eat, and we'll look forward to our keynoter. Thanks.
The President of Boeing Australia, New Zealand, and the South Pacific. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Minister for Employment, Minister for Women, and the Minister assisting the Prime Minister for the Public Service, and the Acting Minister for Industry, Innovation, and Science, the Senator, the Honorable Michaela Cash. I'd also like to acknowledge the Minister for Defense Industries of South Australia, the Honorable Martin Hamilton Smith, for hosting such a great conference here in South Australia. And then a congratulations to the leaders of the international space agencies and to our colleagues from the global space community here this week for the conference. Welcome. In Australia, Boeing is known for commercial and defense airplanes flying overhead. And that's why our team is so excited to welcome the IAC to Adelaide and Australia this week, because it gives us an opportunity to share a whole other side of the company with our colleagues here in Australia and think about what the future could hold. We've been, as Jim mentioned earlier, we've been in space since the very beginning, the dawn of the space age, and obviously really look forward to what the future holds. And not to date myself, but I am definitely part of the generation of kids that watched the man land on the moon and say, I want to do that. And that's how many of us got into engineering and science, which is something that really underscores the great opportunity we all have to inspire the next generation of people that will take us to Mars and beyond. With us today, we have two really young, up-and-coming leaders in the company, David Corporal, an Indigenous engineering student that works with our Boeing Research and Technology as an intern. And he is really, his focus and dream is to be the first Aboriginal Australian man in space. And we do wish him well. And then another example would be Jessica Orr. Jessica is a Boeing engineer in our manufacturing facility in Melbourne, graduated from the University of Queensland, always dreamed of being an astronaut and be working in space, but never realized that she'd spent this year as 10 weeks as an intern at NASA. So, and now back here in Australia and really excited for what we have going on here. So we definitely have opportunities, and I know that many of the colleagues in the room are all over the STEM curriculum and trying to inspire the next generation, and I think that's something industry has a great role to play working with government and universities. And of course, space exploration isn't just about the solar system. It's obviously very much about the ecosystem here on Earth, and we all play a great part in that. So I talked about our space business that's global, but we're also doing work here in Australia. And if you do have time to come by our stand and get some of the virtual reality goggles on, you'll see something that was created here in Australia by our research and technology group, which is to do training for the CST 100, which you see behind me. Very, very exciting. And we also are working very closely with a lot of small and medium enterprises here in Australia. And today it is my pleasure to announce that we've signed an agreement with Opaque Space, based in Melbourne, to collaborate with our team on more of this virtual reality training and doing future scenarios for the Starliner. So I know we all feel the urgency, our pursuit of space, and that's why yesterday's announcement and the minister will speak more on was so exciting to all of us. And so I do want to do a round of applause while you're standing here, because it's a fantastic, fantastic step for the Australian government to stand up a space agency. By joining the other world leaders in space, we have no doubt that Australia will invigorate the space agency globally and here at home in Australia. And so we do intend to very actively engage in that activity, and I know the whole group is really looking forward to hearing a little more over the course of the next few months. So now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, the Honorable Michaela Cash.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you so much for that very kind introduction. It is always fantastic to walk into a room and to literally just feel the enthusiasm of everybody here. I commend you on everything you are doing, but more than that, on behalf of our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, can I just say we are just so excited for everything that we look forward to now partnering with you as we go forward into the future. In terms of acknowledgements, can I commence by acknowledging the Premier of South Australia, the Honourable Jay Weatherill, and thank him for hosting, obviously, the conference in South Australia. Also, Minister Mark Hamilton-Smith, fantastic to see you here. And to everybody in this room, everybody is a special guest, in particular because of the unique position that you hold in unlocking so many opportunities, not just for Australians, but I will talk about the opportunities for Australians shortly, but for the opportunities in particular of young men and women. As Maureen said, you know, we're that generation that went, wow, man went to the moon. You know, that generation that you are here representing now, they're going to be saying so much more than that. And it is fantastic to be amongst a group of people who will make that a reality. Can I also say, though, I was in Perth yesterday, but I was watching the announcement by my colleague Simon Birmingham that Australia will establish a national space agency. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an exciting announcement, and yes, thank you very much. Thank you. It is absolutely terrific, and in particular, as I walked through the doors today, to have people literally come up to me and say, Michaela, congratulations. This is a fantastic announcement. It's something that we've all been waiting for, but more than that, it is something we embrace. I have been inundated in the last 24 hours with emails from all over Australia, with just everyday people saying, congratulations to the Turnbull government. But I've also been delighted with the number of Australians who have put their hands up and said, in the national interest, I put myself forward to be on the first spaceship to Mars. So, ladies and gentlemen, can I tell you, it is a very, very long list, and I pity the person who eventually has to choose the final few. But again, I think what that really says, when you're a government and you make an announcement, I don't think it's very often that you are just overwhelmed across Australia with emails of enthusiasm, of opportunity and congratulations. And certainly, as I said, when I was watching yesterday when Simon made the announcement, I certainly felt the buzz that you felt in that room of thousands of people. It really did resonate across Australia. In terms of what the Australian government is doing, and as you know, we have charged someone who is well known to many of you here, and that is our esteemed Dr. Megan Clark and members of the Australian Government Expert Review Panel with shaping the detail and the direction of Australia's space agency. And to all Australians, can I just say, you should feel proud and you should feel inspired that we can call this expertise and the opportunities that we're about to unlock our very own. Delegates, in terms of your industry, a lot has happened in your industry since Australia last hosted the IAC in Melbourne way back in 1998. An international space station has been built. There have been landings on asteroids and comets, orbits of Saturn and Mercury, and probes into interstellar space. Again, on behalf of the Australian Government, we are just absolutely delighted to welcome you all back. And of course, it is fitting that you have come to South Australia, a state with a long association, as you all know, with the space industry. In addition to South Australia's Woomera Test Range and its rich aerospace history, we are, as Australians, not just South Australians, so proud that we can add to the list of Adelaide's illustrious people, of course, someone who has been with you at Congress, and that is NASA astronaut Andy Thomas. It is just an absolute privilege for us to have Andy joining us all at the Congress, and certainly, I don't think Andy's in the room at the moment. However, again, the Prime Minister has asked me to say, Andy, you will have heard this 1,000 times before, but we're going to say it again, welcome home, and as Australians, we are just so very proud of you. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was sort of thinking about this speech, I wanted to take us back to really that giant leap for mankind, and just to reflect on why we took that giant leap. In 1962, just 1 month prior to the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy said the following: "There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may as well ask, why climb the highest mountain?" Kennedy went on to say, "We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organise and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win." And ladies and gentlemen, it is in that spirit of setting challenges that bring out the very, very best of our skills and our energies that we have all come together here in Adelaide. And can I say to everybody here, and in particular on behalf of the next generation who are going to know opportunities that many of us could only have dreamed of, you inspire us all. Can I also thank the IAF for its work in bringing everyone together? I know that space is the rallying point here, but what stands out for me is that the IAF and the IAC continue to be a great force, indeed a showpiece for collaboration. Collaboration between industry, between scientists and governments. This is going to be critical as Australia goes forward in developing our Indigenous space capability. In fact, I look around the room, look at who's here. Collaboration, it's the key word. Collaboration is critical to our global space capability. Last week, one of Australia's leading business media publications hosted an innovation summit in Sydney. CEOs, agency heads, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, owners of big and small enterprises, and parliamentarians of all stripes. They came together over a couple of days and they tried to get a better handle on what innovation can do for us, how we need to harness it for good and prosperity, but more than that, the fears that we all need to dispel. And we're not alone. It's the biggest challenge for leaders and economies worldwide. And of course there is robust debate. You want robust debate. There should be robust debate. But I do note that there was no argument amongst the plethora of people in the room about the need to collaborate. Indeed, to innovate is to collaborate. And this week, we are here at the International Astronautical Congress, whose central platform and reason to be for nearly 70 years has been innovation and collaboration, the essential DNA of space discovery and research. Space and all that it conjures up in our hearts and minds, from preschoolers to astronautical superstars, holds special sway with us beyond any other human pursuit. It has an intimidable power to engage, to inspire, and to transform. For a science that is so extraordinarily complex, most of us, in fact, it doesn't really matter who you are, and that's the wonderful thing about yesterday's announcement. We can easily see its worth, but more than that, we can see its potential as well as its awe. Back in 1958, a few years before Kennedy outlined that daring vision for the moon landing, President Eisenhower was doing exactly what we are all doing now, looking to bring clarity to the direction of his nation's space program. He got his Science Advisory Committee onto this, and they published, and some of you may well know this well, the Introduction to Outer Space for Americans' Common Consumption. There were a number of lines in this publication that really did speak to me. The first was, it acknowledged the compelling urge of man, one would now say man and women, to explore and to discover, the thrust of curiosity that leads men to try to go where no one has gone before. And secondly, research in outer space affords new opportunities in science, but as was said by Dr. Doherty, it does not diminish the importance of science on Earth. Many of the secrets of the universe will be fathomed in the laboratories on Earth. And 60 years later, those words of yesterday still ring true today. But there is a difference, as we all know. What's different is that whilst then the space race was all about political ideologies and the differences and the competition between them, now it's a different kind of race. A race that willing and responsible individuals and nations are running together to understand what we all can about the Earth, the solar system and the universe, and to promote the peaceful use of space for the benefit of all. I don't need to tell you, because you've been there working in space now for decades and decades. We've got satellites, we've got payloads and space shuttles, the International Space Station, enabling vast telecommunications networks, Earth and climate imagery, global positioning systems, and so much more. Now, the space race that we're talking about is a race to keep ahead of the fast rising curve across new frontiers with new technologies and, excitingly, with new participants. Space is no longer the rarefied domain of national governments. The innovation revolution really is storming the world. Just look around the room today. Look who is represented here. Industry 4.0, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. It is all there. We're also seeing, and this really excites me, privately funded space entrepreneurs launching their own rockets, working towards easy and affordable, God willing, space travel. These formidable innovators, many of them in the room today, are in the collaborative mix with governments, science agencies, universities, scientists, engineers, venture capitalists, everyday capitalists, driving the technology and proving the benefits to humankind and the planet. And ladies and gentlemen, it's in this context and through this lens that I turn to Australia's place in the global space sector. A little over a week ago, the world was abuzz with the news about NASA's Cassini spacecraft, as you all know. The Deep Space Communications Complex, located in Canberra, received the last signal from the spacecraft as it plunged into Saturn's atmosphere. The complex, managed by Australia's premier science agency, CSIRO, was part of Cassini's historic mission from the very, very beginning. This contribution to NASA's space exploration is just but one example of the important role that Australia plays in the global space industry. Our Luncheon sponsor, Boeing, provides another excellent example. When their CST-100 Starliner, which is being developed by Boeing, as you know, as part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, first docks at the International Space Station, its success will be in part thanks to the effort of an Australian team. A Brisbane-based group of engineers developed a virtual reality training system for the Starliner, which, when coupled with simulators in the United States, will teach astronauts how to operate the capsule and dock at their destination. It will be the first time Boeing has built a system like that outside of the United States, and is a great tribute, and very proudly we say, the talent and experience that we have here in Australia. But it's also talent and experience that we need to continue to develop. In terms of the Australian government's investment, we are very, very proud to be investing in R&D in the sector and building strategic partnerships. For example, we in Australia have 2 cooperative research centres funded by the government to the tune of approximately $52 million that are conducting space-related research. One is investigating ways to reduce the threat to space-based infrastructure and space debris. The other is supporting critical spatial infrastructure in Australia and New Zealand for delivering essential services in health, energy, defence and urban planning, and improving farm productivity and sustainability. We're also very excited about our R&D partnership with Lockheed Martin, Inmarsat and GMV, involving the testing of a satellite-based augmentation system for the Australasia region. This work, led by Geoscience Australia, is already improving GPS integrity and accuracy from 5 metres to about 0.5 metres. And then we also have Digital Earth Australia. Australia's investment in this world-first analysis platform will, for example, allow startups and small to medium enterprises to use big space data to innovate and to develop new products. Australia, as you all know, values working with other countries. And this is, of course, reflected most notably in our successful and long-running civil space partnership with the United States. This partnership has allowed us to play a vital role in space vehicle tracking with the US and globally, and to help the US in virtually all of its human and robotic missions to space. this year marks 60 years of Australia-US cooperation in civil space, which started when NASA established a radio tracking facility in Woomera. The relationship was formalised 3 years later with the signing of a bilateral treaty on space vehicle tracking that has continued, I'm delighted to say, to this very day. The treaty covers facilities such as Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex, and that of course is part of NASA's Deep Space Network, as well as tracking and data relay satellite facilities in my home state of Western Australia and the Northern Territory. I'm also pleased that a new agreement will soon be signed which updates the nomenclature and structure of the existing cooperation arrangement and confirms the basis for future cooperation between our two countries. I'm also pleased to announce a new agreement that CSIRO has just signed with the UK's Surrey Satellite Technology Limited. It is for a 10% share of tasking and acquisition time on the Novastar satellite, one of the world's most sophisticated new satellites. The Novastar overcomes the main drawbacks of traditional optical imaging satellites by being able to take images of Earth through clouds and even at night. The agreement, which is worth more than $10 million over 7 years, will give CSIRO the highest priority to direct Novastar to collect radar imagery all over Australia and access to data collected elsewhere around the world. This data is highly valuable for us, especially in Australia, because it can support our response to natural disasters such as cyclones and floods. As I speak, ladies and gentlemen, I understand that a scale model of the Novastar satellite is being unveiled at the CSIRO stand here in the Convention Centre. So I urge you, after the lunch, do take the time to go and have a look at this model, have a chat with the representatives from CSIRO, but in particular, how you might be able to partner with them in relation to access to this data. In terms of Australia and the emerging space sector, part of the growth we're seeing in the space sector is the emerging area of small satellites and other niche activities. Until recently in Australia, the approvals we've granted to Australians to launch satellites overseas were almost exclusively for large communication satellites. But that is now changing. Last year, the government gave approval to a small company, CubeRider, to send a circuit board to the International Space Station to run high school experiments. In terms of the opportunities that this will now create for the young scientists, the young engineers, the young mathematicians and the young entrepreneurs, can you imagine those opportunities for those young people coming through the pipeline? But we haven't stopped there. We've also issued launch certificates to the universities of Adelaide, New South Wales and Sydney, allowing them to launch their CubeSats to the International Space Station as part of an atmospheric research project in the Spherosphere. Again, we haven't stopped there, ladies and gentlemen. We're also on track to reform our space laws, to simplify the way we regulate the sector and reduce the barriers that are currently faced to participation in space activities. Following on from the review of our legislation, I expect to introduce a bill that will reform the industry in our next autumn sittings. If I can now pull all these threads together and bring us to how the Australian government intends to optimise all of these activities. As you are all well and truly aware, some months ago we commissioned a review of Australia's space industry capability. The review, which you've all heard about, and as you know, which is being chaired by the esteemed Dr. Megan Clark, former Chief of CSIRO, and of course our expert reference group. One of the issues which Dr. Clark was looking at was, of course, whether or not Australia should have a national space agency. Well, the good news, as we all know, is that question has been answered, and yesterday we announced that we would go forward with the establishment of the Australian Space Agency. In terms of what we as a government see this doing, it will provide the vehicle for Australia to have a long-term strategic plan for space, a plan that supports the innovative application of space technologies and grows our domestic space industry, including through defence space procurement. And we welcome the Labor Party's support for our announcement. Bipartisan support, as we all know, is going to be vital for the long-term success of our National Space Agency. But this is not just about an agency for an agency's sake. And that is why the review that Australia has commissioned is just so important. We now need to put in the hard work to determine what form of agency and what mandate is best suited to support our, Australia's, growing space industry. And that is why I will be asking, in fact I've already asked Dr Clark and the expert reference group to provide advice on a possible structure and scope for the agency as part of the strategy that it is preparing for government consideration by the end of March 2018. The group will of course consider all other aspects of the review's terms of reference for final inclusion in the strategy. I've heard a lot of people ask, but why even have a review? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't need to tell you, as people who have worked in this industry for decades and decades, the space industry of today is not the same as the space industry of yesterday. And it certainly is not going to be the same industry as we look forward a decade from now. From our perspective, it is therefore crucial that we take the time to understand that landscape and create the right structure and put in place the right policies which will give us as Australia the right agency. An agency that is right for the industry of today and for tomorrow, not for the industry of yesterday. And so, as many people have asked, will we have a NASA? The answer to the question is no. What we will have, though, is an Australian space agency, an agency that is right for our nation and right for our industry. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, Australia, as you all know, and in particular, given everything I've been able to outline, we have a rich history of involvement in space exploration. And we are very, very proud as a nation that we've had the people with the know-how and the world-class facilities to be able to make a positive contribution to this global endeavour. But we now need to build on our achievements as the global space industry grows. This calls for a strategic approach based on a clear understanding of our strengths and our capabilities. Can I again thank Dr Clark and the expert reference group for their work to date. And Dr Clark, I think like so many in the room, we do look forward to receiving your report in but a few months' time. Can I also, though, thank everybody who has made this conference and the activities that I know that you're seeing possible. I never underestimate how difficult it is to get so many people together. But the comments that I've had as I've been here talking to people outside is that this conference has been absolutely sensational. And as I look around the room, what do I see? I see leaders. I see leaders of literally a stellar industry. One that shows the world that the very, very best of innovation and creative scientific thinking has absolutely no bounds. So, ladies and gentlemen, while sophisticated technology and method push the unimaginable bounds of outer space, those same tools are delivering benefits and solutions in everyday life here on Earth. I thank you for your participation at this conference, but more than that, on behalf of the Australian Government, we really do look forward to working with you now and as we launch into the future. Thank you very much.